Albert Einstein was not born a genius. He was born in Ulm, Germany, in 1879, to an ordinary family. As a child, he was quiet, slow to speak, and different from other kids. His parents even worried that something might be wrong with him. But Albert wasn't slow, he was curious. He spent hours staring at the sky, wondering how light traveled and why the compass needle always pointed north. He once said, "Curiosity is more important than knowledge." At school, however, teachers didn't appreciate his curiosity. He disliked the strict German education system. His teachers wanted obedience, but Albert wanted understanding. When one teacher told him, "You will never amount to anything," young Einstein quietly disagreed. Not out loud, but deep inside. He believed that asking questions was more valuable than memorizing answers. He spent his free time reading books about science, mathematics, and philosophy. At age 12, he discovered geometry and was amazed by the perfection of shapes and numbers. He once said, "I never teach my pupils. I only try to provide the conditions in which they can learn." When Einstein was 15, his family moved to Italy, but he stayed behind to finish school. He felt lonely and frustrated. Eventually, he dropped out. One of the world's greatest geniuses had become a school dropout. But this was not the end of his story, it was the beginning. He joined his family in Italy and later moved to Switzerland, where education was more open and creative. There, he studied at the Polytechnic Institute in Zurich. He didn't stand out as a top student, but he stood out as a deep thinker. He often skipped classes and preferred to study alone, asking himself big questions about time, space, and energy. After graduation, he struggled to find a job. No university wanted to hire him as a teacher. Eventually, he took a modest position as a patent clerk in the Swiss Patent Office. He examined other people's inventions, but secretly, he was working on his own. The year 1905 changed everything. While working full-time at the patent office, Einstein published 4 scientific papers that transformed physics forever. The first paper explained the photoelectric effect, how light can act like a stream of tiny particles, or quanta. The second paper discussed the motion of atoms in liquids, proving that atoms truly exist. The third paper introduced special relativity, a theory that changed how people understood time and space. The fourth one introduced his famous equation, E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. That single equation showed that matter and energy are connected, that a small amount of mass could release enormous energy. It was one of the most important scientific discoveries in human history, and all of it came from a 26-year-old patent clerk, working quietly in his spare time. This year, 1905, is still called Einstein's Annus Mirabilis, his miracle year. After his miracle year, Einstein's reputation grew quickly. He became a university professor and continued developing his theories. But he didn't stop there. He spent years searching for something even bigger, a way to explain gravity and connect it with the laws of motion. In 1915, he finally completed his general theory of relativity, which described how massive objects like the sun bend space and time around them. It was revolutionary and very difficult to prove. In 1919, during a solar eclipse, British astronomer Arthur Eddington observed how light from distant stars bent as it passed near the sun, exactly as Einstein's theory predicted. Overnight, Einstein became a global celebrity. Newspapers around the world called him the new Newton. But fame didn't change him. He continued to speak softly, think deeply, and live simply. He cared more about understanding the universe than about attention or wealth. He once said, "Try not to become a man of success, but rather try to become a man of value." As Einstein's fame grew, so did his sense of responsibility. He used his voice not only for science but also for peace and justice. In the 1930s, when Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany, Einstein, who was Jewish, decided to leave Europe. He moved to the United States and began working at Princeton University. He loved freedom of thought and hated violence. He often spoke about the dangers of nationalism and war. He said, "Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding." However, the world around him was changing. In 1939, as World War II began, Einstein signed a letter to US President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning that Germany might be trying to build a powerful new weapon, an atomic bomb, using his equation E equals mc squared. That letter helped start the Manhattan Project, the secret US program that eventually built the atomic bomb. Einstein later regretted signing that letter. He said, "If I had known that they would do this, I would have never lifted a finger." After the war, he became an activist for peace and education, using his fame to promote kindness, tolerance, and global cooperation. Even in his later years, Einstein never stopped asking questions. He was no longer focused only on physics. He also thought about philosophy, religion, and human values. He often said he wanted to know the mind of God, not in a religious sense, but as a symbol of understanding the deepest laws of nature. He refused to believe the universe was ruled by chance. When quantum physics introduced the idea that particles behave randomly, Einstein famously said, "God does not play dice with the universe." He spent the rest of his life searching for a unified field theory, a single set of laws that could explain everything in the universe. He never completed it, but his efforts inspired generations of scientists who continued his search. To Einstein, science and imagination were inseparable. He said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge. For knowledge is limited, but imagination embraces the entire world." Albert Einstein passed away in 1955 at the age of 76, leaving behind not just theories, but a legacy of curiosity, courage, and humility. He refused to have his body buried in one place, saying he didn't want to be worshipped. Instead, his ashes were scattered in a secret location. But his spirit, his way of thinking, lives everywhere, in science, in technology, in education, and in art. Every time we look at the stars, use a GPS, or study the mysteries of space-time, we are touching the legacy of Einstein. He showed the world that greatness doesn't come from talent alone, but from the courage to stay curious, to think differently, and to follow your imagination, even when the world doesn't understand you. He once said, "A person who never made a mistake never tried anything new." And that might be the greatest lesson Albert Einstein ever gave us. That our mistakes, our curiosity, and our imagination are not weaknesses. They are the very things that make us human. So what can we learn from Einstein today? That knowledge begins with curiosity, that progress begins with questions, and that the most powerful force in the universe is not gravity or light, but the human mind that dares to understand them. Einstein showed us that no matter where you start, even if you're a quiet, misunderstood child, you can change the world if you keep asking, why? As you listen to this story, remember, your potential is not measured by grades or titles. It's measured by your willingness to learn, explore, and imagine. Einstein once said, "Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think." That's what English MasterClaas is all about, learning to think, grow, and see the world through the language of discovery.